Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. Joan Vaux, or Mother Guildford, the woman who saved Henry VIII. During the reign of King Henry VIII, the king's love life could have been described as incredibly turbulent. Henry is known for being the monarch who had 6 wives, 2 of which he executed inside the walls of the Tower of London. Much of the chaos came after the king's first marriage to Catherine of Aragon, as Henry was forced to split from the Catholic Church and Rome in order to secure a divorce from Catherine. However, he did have some help within the court from courtiers and advisors who helped him to secure what he wanted. One of the women who helped Henry was Joan Vaux, also known as Lady Guildford. Joan Vaux was born in 1463, and she was a prominent courtier inside the court of a number of monarchs. She was the daughter of Sir William Vaux and Catherine Penistone, and her brother Nicholas was a knight who fought for King Henry VII. He was knighted on the battlefield for his services, so Joan was part of a rather favourable family. However, while she was around 8 years old, her father passed away. This must have been very distressing for the young girl, but she then became part of the entourage for Margaret Beaufort, the Countess of Richmond. Margaret was the mother of King Henry VII, and Joan and Margaret got on very well. Joan became a lady-in-waiting for her, which meant she and the king's mother were very close and most probably spoke a great deal about issues close to the throne, especially after her son defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. At the age of 26, she married her first husband, Sir Richard Guildford. Richard was a prominent courtier inside Henry VII's court, and he had a key role in the military, and he served the king at sea and was a commander of 550 marines and sailors and a number of ships. He was a reliable soldier and accompanied the king to France, where he was involved in peace negotiations between England and France. Inside of court, Richard was also trusted with being present for marriage negotiations between Henry's eldest son, Prince Arthur, and also Catherine of Aragon, and he helped to deal with the Spanish in this. At Joan and Richard's wedding, the king and queen were both present, and together they had one son called Henry, who also held prominent position in later Tudor court. Joan was very reliable, and around 1499 she worked as the lady governess to Margaret and Mary Tudor, the daughters of King Henry VII. Joan, and in particular Princess Mary, had a close relationship, and she was involved in the education of the two. In this role, she began to meet with a prominent scholar and philosopher, the Dutch humanist Erasmus, who even paid a visit to see the children. Joan made a good impression on Erasmus, and he later wrote to her son Henry and called her the noble lady your mother, as he wished her much happiness and good health. She was also involved in the life of Prince Arthur, and she once danced with the young boy to help him learn Spanish dances. However, her husband passed away whilst on a pilgrimage in 1506 in Jerusalem, and after this she returned to serve Margaret Beaufort. She was close to Margaret until she passed away in 1509, but following her death she retired from court. It was believed that Joan was happy with her role, and she lived on a modest pension in Blackfriars in London, but later she inherited a house in Southwark and a significant degree of land in Suffolk and Norfolk. Despite being retired from court, Joan Vaux was still close with the royal family, and when Princess Mary was planned to marry King Louis XII of France, Joan attended the ceremony and travelled to France for this. She was summoned to work in France in Mary's household, but was later dismissed, which greatly upset Mary, and she protested to Thomas Wolsey about this, saying, "I have not yet seen in France any lady or gentleman so necessary for me as she is." Then the cardinal tried to convince King Louis to allow Joan to return, but he refused to allow this. It's believed that Louis was a controlling husband who disliked the closeness Joan Vaux had with Mary, his wife, and he believed her constant presence undermined his relationship with her, and she caused Louis great frustration. Joan returned back to England and continued her retirement, and King Henry VIII, who was now on the throne, gave her 2 pensions worth around £60 in value. She was later also gifted a ton of duty-free wine each year also, showing that Henry VIII respected her. It is considered that during the reign of King Henry VIII, Joan, who had known Catherine of Aragon during her time with Prince Arthur, that she was recalled to court to act as a lady-in-waiting for Catherine. It's believed that she must have had some inside knowledge and information regarding the king and his then marriage to Catherine of Aragon. The early years of King Henry VIII and Catherine's marriage were deemed to have been happy, but when the king became infatuated and obsessed with Anne Boleyn, a woman who captivated him at court, he had a huge problem. This has been referred to as the King's Great Matter, and Henry tried to get a divorce or an annulment from his wife Catherine, so he could freely marry Anne, the woman he greatly lusted and quested after. Anne, knowing how to keep her man waiting, said she would only engage in a physical relationship with the king once the matter of Catherine of Aragon was taken care of. This lust led Henry to search for any excuse to get rid of Catherine, especially after the Pope's continual refusal to grant a divorce to the royal couple, or even an annulment. Henry even sent a council of scholars to task, who came up with the question of legality to the marriage that Henry wanted. However, he needed evidence. Henry VIII, in a bizarre request, needed witnesses to testify that his wife, Catherine of Aragon, had actually consummated and slept with her first husband, Henry's brother, Prince Arthur. With this, he could then have the legal grounds at the time to ensure that in his eyes he could secure himself an annulment. According to the book of Leviticus, if Arthur and Catherine had slept together, this would have made Henry's marriage to Catherine illegal and illegitimate, meaning Henry was in fact free to marry Anne Boleyn. As a former lady in the household of Elizabeth of York and Margaret Beaufort, both whom were close to Prince Arthur's court, Joan Vaux was summoned to give evidence as to whether Prince Arthur and Catherine of Aragon had in fact consummated their marriage. She stated that they had spent their wedding night together in the same bed, and she said that she had intimate knowledge from Queen Elizabeth of York that Arthur and Catherine had laid together, as man and wife, all alone, 5 or 6 nights after the said marriage. This was exactly the evidence Henry believed he needed, and following this he practically ripped up his marriage documents, got rid of Catherine of Aragon and shunned her, and then subsequently married Anne Boleyn. Joan Vaux's testimony was one of many that saved the king and allowed him to get what he wanted. This left her in favour of King Henry VIII, and he later sent a number of New Year's gifts to Joan, including a garter with a gold buckle and pendant. Joan later married a second husband, Sir Anthony Poyntz, who was also a naval commander, but following his death, Joan lived a quiet life. She retired to the Hospital of St Mark, which was a small prayer house in Bristol, and after this was dissolved during the dissolution of the monasteries, she returned to live in London. Joan Vaux, Mother Guildford, died on the 4th of September 1538, having lived to around the age of 75, which was incredibly long for a woman of the Tudor period. She was one of the final people to be buried inside the convent of Blackfriars. So Joan Vaux lived a very interesting life, very close to the Tudor royal family. She was present throughout the early days of the Tudor period and also in the reign of King Henry VIII. She was well liked and trusted by both Henry VII and Henry VIII, and she was well valued by the daughters of Henry VII. She was a constant at the royal court and was very trusted. However, she is remembered today as the woman who helped Henry to get what he wanted, the divorce that allowed him to marry Anne Boleyn, a wife he would within years order the execution of. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.